All right, I think I am going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to Coffee with the Curator. I'm Aaliyah Bennick. I'm the events manager at the Science Museum of Minnesota. You probably all know that already because I'm always here every month. So it's nice to see all of you again. And I hope, like me, that you're looking forward to a healthy and happy holiday season. And I'm really excited about our topic today. So first of all, thank you for your continued support of our mission to make science education accessible to everyone. I do want to remind you, you've probably all gotten all the emails and seen everything on social media already, but today or tomorrow is Give to the Max Day. Oh my God, our membership associate is going to be so annoyed with me for not remembering, but it is coming up. So it's today. Today is Give to the Max Day. So if you want to give to the max to the Science Museum of Minnesota, you can visit our link at smm.org/give. I am so embarrassed that I didn't know that. But I did want to give you that reminder right at the top. So just a little background on our event format today. If you are new to this program, we'll be running the program with a few different presenters, and the best way to see them is by choosing speaker view in the upper right of your Zoom screen. I also want to remind you we're going to have time for a Q&A towards the conclusion of the program, and you can use the chat window that's at the bottom of your screen to share your thoughts and questions. And it's also where we can share links and other content that's pertinent to the conversation today. So thank you for that. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our program for the day today. We're going to, as I mentioned, be giving thanks for the great food and drink that make our celebrations festive, and discuss beer, brewing, and sustainability with our friends at Bang Brewing and the St. Croix Watershed Research Station. I'm excited to learn about the ways that science and business can intersect to create delicious products that I feel good about consuming. And I certainly will be doing that next week at Thanksgiving. We're going to start today with Adam Heathcote, and I wanted to start with Adam, just a little background. I'm not sure all of you even are that familiar with our St. Croix Watershed Research Station, and I think it's such a wonderful asset at our museum. They do science every day and do research on water and water quality. So I asked Adam Heathcote, who's the director of water and climate change and is based at the St. Croix Watershed Research Station, to tell us about some of the research that our scientists are conducting there to ensure clean water and sustainable crops for brewers and farms. So Adam, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Aaliyah. Yeah, and thanks for everyone for coming for this Coffee with a Curator. I have my coffee here, so I hope you have some as well. So as Aaliyah mentioned, we thought maybe some of you weren't that familiar with the St. Croix Watershed Research Station. So we're part of the Science Museum of Minnesota, but we're located in a physically different space. We're located about 10 miles north of Stillwater, right on the St. Croix River in the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway. We've been there for quite a long time, going on 32 years now, established in 1989. And most of the people who work out there work on research topics that have to do with water quality or water quantity, or how we use the land can impact either of those things. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about some of the projects we've been working on this year. So go ahead, Aaliyah. So as some of you may know, our most valuable natural resource here in Minnesota and around the world is threatened, fresh water. We all need it to survive, and we all enjoy it for recreational purposes. And a lot of the work we do revolves around using science to learn about how we can better protect or restore that valuable natural resource. A couple examples that are timely. Just this year, you may have heard we've been working all along the North Shore of Lake Superior, looking for a newly detected invasive algae coming out of Lake Superior into the North Shore streams. This thing is called we call it Didymosphenia geminata. That's the scientific name, but you may hear about it in the media as rock snot, and that's because it forms these nasty, snotty mats in our rivers, which are very detrimental to things like trout spawning. So it's something we're really concerned about. We actually detected it for the first time ever in 6 new streams along the North Shore just this year, just this August, in fact. Next. And these issues aren't just issues for Minnesota. As you know, these are global issues, of course, water and climate change. And so the scientists working at the St. Croix Watershed Research Station work all around the world on these topics. This was just from this year. We had an expedition to Greenland looking at how lakes there one of the most sensitive environments to climate change and one of the fastest warming areas on the planet, are responding. It doesn't look very warm at this point, believe it or not. This was actually in August, or I guess early September of this year. But I actually arrived in Greenland a day before, or a day after Hurricane Larry hit. So it was news to me, but apparently hurricanes can hit Arctic environments. And so they dropped all this snow, and you can see in the background the ice sheet there. This work is looking at how these lakes are changing as the temperature is warming. It's warmed already 5 degrees in this area of Greenland in the last 10 years. And of course, we also work right here in our own backyard in St. Paul. This is work we're doing in cooperation with Forever Green at the University of Minnesota, planting perennial alternative crops as demonstration plots right in our big backyard. So this is workers from Forever Green in the Science Museum planting perennial flax and kernza, 2 alternative perennial grains that keep cover on the landscape for a longer period of time. And then kind of the other unique thing our scientists do is that we always incorporate stakeholders and the general public at all stages of our science. And we make sure that we bring our science directly to the public, don't rely on them seeking out, our scientific papers. We bring it right to them. This is a photo of Jason, who will speak just after me at an agroecology summit that we hosted in Windham, Minnesota, talking about sustainable alternatives in farming, how we can do better with our farming practices and also be economically feasible. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jason Ulrich, who's an assistant scientist at the St. Croix Watershed Research Station and works on many of these issues of sustainability and water and the intersection of them. So Jason, go ahead.
All right, thanks, Adam. Thanks, Aaliyah. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I'll start with this slide and just say that really for much of the last almost 30 years, the research station, the St. Croix Watershed Research Station, has really been on the forefront of trying to better understand the effects of ag on lakes and rivers across Minnesota and try to be on the forefront of trying to propose practical solutions to this problem. It's a giant problem in the environmental world, and it's what we spend most of our time doing. In doing so over time, I think our thinking has really evolved from conventional methods of trying to do agricultural conservation to really looking at the role of perennial vegetation as a solution to our issues. And so really the question that I'm sort of going to throw out today, and really the reasoning behind the research I'm going to talk about, is how do we get more perennial vegetation in our agricultural landscapes for the benefit of both water quality and wildlife. And by perennial, I mean plants that live all year round, as opposed to corn and soybeans, which are annuals. They die off in the winter. They need to be replanted in the spring. Perennial veg does not leave the ground bare fall, winter, and spring, which dramatically reduces pollution to streams and lakes downstream and provides habitat all year round. It also needs substantially less fertilizer. So to get, next slide, please, to give you some context of the magnitude of the problem here, corn and beans, soybeans right now are growing on about 16 million acres in Minnesota. If you look at the diagonal from the northwest down to the southeast, about half the state has some form of really intensive ag with regard to corn and beans. We used to grow a lot of beets in the northwest part of the state. Most of those have been replaced by, and wheat was grown there. Most of those crops have been replaced by corn and soybeans these days. It's a tough nut to crack because the corn and soybean acres have been growing. They've always been growing since 40s and 50s, but in the last 15, 20 years, they've increased at the expense of the grasslands. These would have been areas around the existing fields that maybe weren't as productive in the past to grow things on, and they grew pasture, hay, or so on them. But now with increasingly favorable economics to grow corn and beans, most of these acres have been replaced, and we are left with largely a corn and soybean landscape in agriculture because of the favorable economics. They're doing exactly what the policies that are put in place incent them to do. On this map, the areas that are yellow-orange indicate those agricultural areas. And if you, also for context, the southeast part of this, the south central part of the state has some of the most fertile farmland that exists in the entire world. So it's a great place to grow these sorts of crops. It's highly productive. Also for context, in 2020, these acres yielded a market value of $10 billion. So we're talking a big economic footprint. Next, please. So unfortunately, this intensification has resulted in things that probably a lot of us know. We have a lot of what we refer to as impairments across our lakes and rivers. Impaired means that 50% of our lakes and rivers, just that this has increased just over the last couple of years, have been assessed to be impaired in terms of swimming and drinking and fishing, in that they do not meet federally mandated legal standards. The photo on the right shows us typical, what's become more typical in Minnesota, scummy green lake. That's a result of blue-green algae. That's a condition that's becoming more and more prevalent. On the right, this is at Prescott, where the St. Croix and the Mississippi come together. That's the mud of the Mississippi, the muddy Mississippi. But it's really the mud from the Minnesota River that flows into the Mississippi just upstream of the Science Museum. And that Minnesota River flows through the most intensive agricultural areas in the state, this area in the south central part that I was just referring to. And not every impaired lake and river in the state is a result of agriculture, but within the parts of the state where ag predominates, the vast majority of lakes and rivers are impaired in this way. Also, in addition to that, we now have a nitrate problem. Nitrate is one of the is the chief fertilizer, the chief most important nutrient for all plants, terrestrial plants, and it has been trickling down in the groundwater and recently has started to contaminate drinking water wells, both private ones and municipal ones. The map on the right there is trying to show where you see the dark blue dots, municipal wells where the nitrate concentrations in the drinking water that's coming out of the wells is exceeding 10 milligrams per liter. That's a technical term to say that's too much, and that is above a safe drinking water standard. And folks are probably also aware that nitrate flowing in all the rivers, shown on the right photo, is what causes the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. So nitrate is also a big issue in addition to some of the effects that I was talking about in lakes and rivers. And then also another emerging issue, this is relatively new as well, the last 10 or 15 years, this increase in intensification of ag has resulted in the loss of these grasslands and a substantial decline in the birds, pollinators, and monarch butterflies across these agricultural regions. For instance, monarch populations, this was I think 2018, are down over 75% since 1995, and that problem has only increased since then. So we have a water quality problem, a local problem, a regional problem. We also have a habitat problem. So we get back to sort of what can be done. We know that replacing corn and beans with perennial vegetation is the most effective way to improve both these water quality issues and habitat, but it's immensely expensive. It's extremely expensive for farmers or the taxpayers to make happen, because out of that 16 million acres I showed you, we might have to convert 2 to 3 million acres to prevent perennial vegetation to meet these water quality and habitat goals. And on the vast majority of these acres, the cost to do this will have to be similar to what farmers are currently receiving in income from growing corn and soybeans. That's what makes this a huge nut to crack. And it's the main reason nothing significant has ever really been accomplished, and likely won't be unless policies and economics of both row crop ag and conservation drastically change. Next. So this leads us to really our research questions. For instance, so if we were trying to get perennial vegetation on the landscape, we know it's extremely expensive. Perhaps the best place to start is, what if farmers were publicly incentivized to retire unprofitable cropland or grow perennial cash crops on it? So unprofitable cropland are areas within corn and soybean fields that on average do not turn a profit, because like in this photo, they're often too wet to get consistent year-to-year yields. The crops die because of the saturated soil, and they end up not yielding anything. They could be potentially the best places to start, because in theory, land that isn't making any income as it is would take less money as an incentive to convert. So one project that we were spending a lot of time on is mapping the extent of unprofitable cropland in the state and determining the potential costs and benefits, and most importantly, the policies needed to convert it to perennial vegetation. And last, we'll leave with this, to take this concept a little bit further, and to have a nice fun segue to talk about beer, which is going to be a little bit more upbeat than this talk perhaps. What if we started to think about perennials as replacing cereal grains within our food chain, within our supply chain of how we make our food? One of those candidates right now that's getting a lot of buzz, and deservedly so, is something we call kernza, which I believe may be the name of the grain, but the plant is called the intermediate wheatgrass. It's a perennial grass that creates a wheat-like kernel. And as I said, it's perennial, so it stays on the ground all year round and provides habitat, takes less inputs. And what if we could piggyback on kernza, for instance, and what if farmers were publicly incentivized to grow kernza for livestock feed, for instance? So this would yield the upside to doing something like livestock feed would yield a much bigger upside than, say, just doing beer or bread, because they huge amounts of the landscape are grown for livestock feed right now. Or what if the farmers weren't incentivized to plant it because it costs more for farmers to plant and they make less money from it? But if that price could be passed on to the consumers, because the consumers may want to buy a product that is more sustainable. So just one calculation, and I'll end this, that we've done with regard to kerns is we said, okay, what if we took, if all of the hogs that were raised in Minnesota on a yearly basis, there's about 8 million of them. What if their feed, which is predominantly corn, some soybeans, what if 25% of that feed was substituted with kernza? What would that look like on the landscape? Well, we've estimated that we could put kerns on about 1.2 million acres in Minnesota to replace that, to create the food stock to replace that 25% of hog feed. And the economic sort of bottom line from a market or a consumer perspective is that pork would have to be priced to break even 50% more per pound than currently. Depending on your perspective on whether that seems like a lot or not very much, it certainly seems like something that could be in the ballpark, something that a policy could be written around, perhaps. It would have to radically change from the way the policies work now. But there could be a tremendous upside to trying to seek a policy like that and to put kerns in something that is to replace feedstocks that we grow on a huge part of our landscape right now. So those are just a sampling of the things that we're working on. In terms of both of these projects, we are finishing very soon. And I guess we should talk about beer now. And thanks for your attention. Back to you, Aaliyah.
Thank you so much, Jason and Adam. I always am just amazed with the kind of work and the research and even the policy thought that our team at St. Croix is doing. And I love being able to share that with all of our members. I think a lot of these issues can kind of seem really big and really hard to grasp. And I think you do such a good job breaking it down, but I wanted to bring in our friends at Bang Brewing next, because when we're making choices about the products that we're buying and that we're putting on our tables, we can think about how these partnerships with scientists and farmers and small businesses can really work together for good. And I asked our friends Sandy and Jay Boss-Febo of Bang Brewing to join us to tell us a little bit about their philosophy and their business with Bang Brewing. Sandy and Jay are a husband and wife duo, and they are an owner brewer team making a range of high quality. I'm just spotlighting you, Sandy and Jay. Sorry, I can't do two things at once. I got to do that right now. So Sandy and Jay Boss-Febo are a husband and wife owner brewer team making a range of high quality rustic ales and lagers. And they do that without the use of finings, unfiltered, unpasteurized, and their beers are also naturally carbonated. Each batch is crafted with an all organic and sustainably farmed ingredients. And I've asked them to talk about what sustainability means to them as they source and produce their beers. Welcome, Sandy and Jay.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us to participate today. I have to say I'm really inspired by the work that your team is doing and very grateful. The work is so important, and sharing it with us is really lovely. I think as a small brewer, what Jay and I focused on early and has become our motto is biggest impact with the smallest footprint. So that very simple phrase really kind of drives everything that we do. As a brewery, we're in our 9th year now for tap room, and we built our facility. So we've been back in this industrial area of St. Paul for about a decade. We bought the land in 2011 and broke ground in 2012. And as you can see in this first image, what we ended up doing was building a 1,300 square foot facility that is a partial prefab. So it is truly a grain bin, new construction. We worked with a team that specializes in prefab, small space, and flexible use design. So this one room serves as not only our brewery and production facility, but it is also our tap room. So we are experts in all things on casters and stacking so that we can move in between functions.
We move a lot of things.
We do. Efficiency is key. The building itself, if you're interested in like a deeper dive on some of the things that we did, our website, which is simply bangbrewing.com, does have a sustainability tab that highlights a list of things that we incorporated to make this build as sustainable as possible. When we determined we were unable to reuse an existing building and needed to pursue a specific build, it was very high priority to make sure that we did so in as thoughtful a manner as possible. So the next slide shows our beer garden, which in the spring, summer, and fall months is bustling. It is a native prairie and wildflower landscaped beer garden that is surrounded by rain gardens. We discovered very early on in this industrial area that we're surrounded by completely impervious asphalt surface that directs all stormwater events in our direction. So in order to help our local environment and our stormwater sewer systems, we try to sink as much water as possible on premise rather than letting it roll out into the street. And you know what? It's beautiful. You can sit in this space and you don't even know the hard work that's happening, but it's a really fun atmosphere to be in. And then,
if you can imagine that the photo there, our lot was class 5 gravel.
Yeah.
It was just a gravel lot. So within 4 or 5 years, that's what happened to it. So.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really impressive.
Bees and butterflies. This year we had more monarchs and swallowtails than we've ever had. So
yeah,
they're finding it.
Awesome. And if you look at the next slide, we even love it in the winter. We are Minnesota through and through. So our friends that come to join us for tap room will enjoy the beer garden year round. The bin kind of becomes a warming house vibe, right? And we have a small fire area that people gather around, which is really pretty special. The next slide is going to show you that this is what we do, right? We craft beer. And in so doing, we use all organic and sustainably farmed ingredients. And as our previous presenters mentioned, all of the acreage that is planted in small grains far surpasses what is planted in produce. And yet we view really our biggest challenge as brewers is to bring awareness to that point. People are so often think about what is on their plate before they think about what is in their glass. And we are working one beer at a time to raise that awareness so that people understand the impact of their choices and the things that they choose to support. The next slide will show you that in the point of considering all aspects, like every day and every business decision is an opportunity to consider what our impact is. So in choosing our kegs for our brewery, we went with Schaefer kegs, which is top of the line German produced kegs, but we chose their eco keg model. So these kegs use 7 pounds less metal per keg. And they also use recycled plastic chimes, top and bottom, that click together. So in our very efficient footprint, it enables us to stack them in a very safe manner. And we're also using less metal, which is fantastic. The next slide will show you that we're also working to bring back returnable bottles. So we package our beer in 750 ml bottles that are returnable. Each bottle is screened with the same design that you'll see in the next slide, that each beer has its label that rides on the crown cap. So in our packaging, the only aspect of the package that becomes waste is the crown cap, which is a very small piece. However, if you go to the next slide, we go through a lot of these. So we're really proud to have found a partner that will recycle these for us. So people that return their bottles to us that leave the caps on, we just add them to our stash, and those go back into recycling. So it seems like the tiniest thing, right? A crown cap.
Those bottle caps are BPA free, which is unheard of in the States. We have to go to Italy to get these caps, and it adds expense, but I think it's the right thing to do.
And that touches on a really great point. Like, as we're talking about some things that we do, like sourcing organic ingredients and finding these caps that are BPA and PVC free, it is often the case that we need to reach further than we would like. We want to be as local as possible, and I'll get to that in a minute, how we found some success in that area. But we've determined early on that unless we demand more, improve demand, things aren't going to change. So our goal is to raise our hand and say, we want this thing. Can we make it happen here? And we just keep trying with every aspect of our business to make that happen. So the next one is going to show you in quick succession, every day that we come here, we know that we have an opportunity to consider how we do things and try and improve. There's always more that can be done. The next slide is going to show you, speaking of more to be done, we very conveniently bought the parcel next to us right before the pandemic hit. And then we had a small panic attack. And just a year ago.
It was a big panic attack.
I know, no kidding, huge. A year ago, we broke ground on that parcel, which is completely paved and has an existing pole barn on it, which was effectively used as a maintenance shed for the company that owned it before us. We broke ground by removing some of that asphalt. So our first move is to make this parcel as permeable as the one that we're on now. So this is just an image of us breaking ground over there, extending our rain garden, adding a new tool, because we're getting really the volume of water that hits this direction goes to this parcel. So this parcel has to work even harder than our current one to sink the stormwater that comes from the parking lot behind us. So this is called a rain guardian. It's a turret that will help us filter out sediment that comes along with that stormwater.
There are two in that rain garden, and it just directs water to those turrets, which are, the sediment is easy to clean out rather than having just run over and then you have to reset the whole garden.
Right, it won't choke out the garden, so it can keep doing what it needs to do. And then the next slide is going to show you really what the core of our heart is to incorporate more perennial ingredients as much as possible. So traditionally for brewers, hops are the only perennial crop that we have available to us. To have a grain that is available for use in brewing that is perennial is mind-blowing. And when we were approached by the Land Institute and the University of Minnesota 5 years ago to partner with them in experimenting with this grain, not only was it a massive honor, but it came with some trepidation. The teams thought it would be a great idea to include the grain in the beer, but really just kind of tuck a little bit in there to give an opportunity to speak about it. No one thought the flavor profile of an intermediate wheatgrass would be anything that people would be excited about in beer. We are very happy to say we have proven them wrong. It is an amazing.
Our first thought is let's use as much of it as we can.
Yes. What does this thing taste like? But it's incredible. It's a really lovely grain that imparts a beautiful flavor profile. So the first beer that we brewed, we incorporated 15.36%. At that time, we were getting the grain directly from the Land Institute and from the University of Minnesota from their research plots. All of the grain, even to date, is still organically grown, no matter where. There aren't the necessary chemicals available or approved for use on this that would push it into a conventional crop. We're happy for that. We hope it stays that way. There's really no need for it. It does amazing work. The next slide is just going to show you just a beautiful view of this incredible grain. This one is a field that we had visited for a farm visit out in Madison, Minnesota. So A-Frame Farms was the first first farm actually in the country to certify organic the crop that they were growing. So this one is the yield from 2019. We've had the honor of brewing also with some grain that has come from wellhead protection plantings. So touching back on those buffer zones, you know, around the farms and around the wellheads that are polluted with these nitrates, and what this grain is capable of achieving in sequestering carbon and pulling those nitrates and turning it into a beautiful grain for use. You know, the fact that we are using a raw grain that comes from this harvest is incredible, but as I understand it, also can yield forage harvest as well. So there's definitely a monetary benefit to farmers. It's just, we are reinventing the wheel. It's pretty incredible.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sandy and Jay, thank you so much for chatting with our group. And I think so much of your work puts into practice some of the research and the ideas that our scientists and policy advocates really endorse. So thanks for giving us a very small but very important perspective. I mean, like physically small, but important perspective. We really appreciate it, and I hope all of you can see they're in their brewery right now. It's right behind you. It looks awesome. Well, I want to go ahead now and just open up the conversation to a Q&A, and I actually see a lot of great comments and questions coming into the chat already for about some of the farming practices. Okay, great. And I see that Jason actually has responded to some of those, so that's wonderful. I want to start with a question for both of you. You both talked a lot about policy, about agriculture, and about water and the future of our climate. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the things you see coming up on the horizon that are exciting practices or policy approaches? Maybe I'll start with Sandy and Jay, and then I'll kick it over to Jason. Is that okay? Okay.
Absolutely. I think, you know, one of the things that I am most excited about, I think Jay will agree, is one of the biggest challenges that we've had as a brewery focused on sourcing organic and sustainably farmed ingredients is they are very difficult to come by. This industry of brewing was so industrialized that not only is it a challenge for brewers to bring things back locally, but to ask for organic and sustainably farmed ingredients. Our cram box is far smaller than a conventional brewer, but it's getting better every year. The amount of time that we have put into sourcing our ingredients has been ridiculous, and not everyone would be as stubborn or tenacious in that quest as we have been. But we've found great partners. We are currently working with the University of Minnesota in establishing an Organic Brewers Alliance. And this is going to be essentially a mapping effort and a networking effort to develop an online tool that is going to make it a lot easier for other brewers that are interested in using the same type of ingredients to source them. It's also going to work in the opposite direction, where farmers who are growing these ingredients and mid-producers who make these ingredients available to us, millers, maltsters, that are working on a smaller scale and allowing us to kind of rebuild the regional network. It's going to make it easier for them to reach out and make their products available too.
Our goal is to make it easy for all brewers to source organic grains and hops and beer ingredients. Yeah, small organic farmers don't market really well. I mean, it's hard to even like find them on a Google search. So it has taken a long time, but
You could say the same of small organic brewers too.
yeah. So it's taken a long time, but it's working out. So yeah, it's getting better. Yeah, our goal is to have every brewer just add some percentage. You don't have to be certified organic. Just we want to prove demand for Kernza and organic ingredients.
Awesome. Okay, so building demand is definitely one area for growth. And then Jason, things that you're seeing on the horizon that you think are exciting or interesting developments to share?
Sorry. I guess I don't really have too much in that vein, and the brewers may be able to answer some of these questions better than I also, but I would encourage people, if they're interested in this, to go out and look up Forever Green, which I know is collaborating with them, and look at the different sorts of things that they are trying to do. They're really on the cutting edge of trying to make alternative crops be economically feasible to grow. There's a crop out there that I only know enough about to be dangerous, called camelina, that's getting a lot of promise as something that can be grown. And really, we're in the early stages of these things. We look at corn and beans, and they were hybridized for generations to be as productive as they are now. And then they were genetically modified to make them as productive and disease resistant and drought resistant as they are now. And so these things are just at the beginning stages of getting some of that same treatment to sort of move them up to a point where, unlike brewing, which there may not be the same cost prohibition, but getting into things like these into our actual global food chain they're going to have to be more productive and cheaper.
Yep.
to compete. And I just say it's exciting in the sense that finally people are working on this, and I think there's a lot of smart people trying to get there.
All right. So there, it sounds like there's definitely, oh no, now I'm freezing, shoot. It sounds like there's definitely a lot of exciting developments on the horizon, and we're so glad for your work and your research in order to help with this topic. I guess I do have one, oh, here, I've got one more question coming in here. How do I know what to do when I'm trying to shop sustainably? Are there labels or other ingredients that people should be looking for? I wonder if we could start with Jay and Sandy on that.
There are some labels that you can keep an eye out for. Organic certification is one. GMO free is another one. Organic is necessarily GMO free, but GMO free is a broader audience too. Fair trade's a nice one to keep your eye out for.
Yeah, just the list of ingredients.
Yep, definitely. Mind the list of ingredients, and then where you shop. I think in the state of Minnesota, we have a wealth of cooperative grocery opportunities and farmers markets. And knowing your farmer, knowing your brewer, knowing where things come from, is really key. And we have a great opportunity here and a really, really strong network for it. So I would recommend doing that.
Anything you would add, Jason or Adam? No.
I mean, personally, I do just like Sandy and Jay said. I if you can pronounce all the ingredients, that's a good first step.
All right, words to live by. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us, all of our members. We really appreciate your support. Just a reminder, it's Give to the Max today, so you can learn more about giving to the Science Museum if you visit our website. I want to say thank you to Sandy and Jay from Bang Brewing. Thank you to Jason and Adam for talking to us from the St. Croix Watershed Research Station. And thanks to all of you for your support. Have a wonderful morning.
Thanks all.
Thank you.